Hey, this section is going to be all about the DriveApp service, and the Google Drive is going to be the place where all of the files get stored, and it really is kind of like a central place where you can accept permissions, share files, get file IDs, set different types of permissions, and access all of the files within a directory type structure. So covering all of the amazing things that you can do with the Google Drive service, and the service allows scripts to create, find, modify files and folders within the Google Drive. So we're going to be selecting different files, different folders, iterating through the contents of those files and those folders, selecting the file objects, folder objects, updating, manipulating, copying them, getting IDs, getting information on them, listing them out, creating an HTML using the Google DriveApp service, so copying files, setting different file meme types, how we can trash files, so sending files to trash, how we can list out files that are within the trash and then bring them back into our regular drive, how we can set permissions, see the permissions on a particular file or folder, update, manipulate those, track that information. As well, we're going to be covering a number of mini coding projects. So these are going to be set to be really useful type coding examples and mini applications that you can utilize within your own projects. So creating an app to list out the folders. So creating some interaction between the Drive app and the spreadsheet app service. So sending the list of files and folders and who has access, who has permissions, adding it into a spreadsheet. Also, how we can select a file and move it into a particular folder, so copying, moving files within the drive. How we can use the search functionality to find files, to find folders, and get their ID values so that we can interact with them within the app script. How we can remove, add editors, viewers using Google Script and interacting with the contents of the drive. And also how we can create a web app to list out folders that are contained within the drive. So all this and a whole lot more, and remember the source code is included, and it is suggested that you try the code out and use these code snippets to create the same functionality within your applications. In this lesson, we are going to be looking at Introduction to the DriveApp service. So this is the service that allows scripts to create, find, modify files and folders within the Google Drive. So first of all, let's go over and create a brand new script. So I've got my Drive opened. I've logged into the Google accounts, and going under New and More, I'm going to select Google Apps Script. So it's going to open up the Google Script Editor. And from here, I'm going to be interacting with the contents within the drive. So there's no option for having a bound script. So these are all going to be standalone scripts that are going to be accessing the drive. And I'll make this a little bit smaller so it's a little bit easier to read. And what we want to do is use the Drive app. So we want to list out all of the files within the drive. And I'll just call it list my files. So creating a function within the Google Script editors. So we want to loop through all of the files. So get the files object. So using the Drive app class, and then get files. So we have a few options where we can retrieve files. So we can get a file by ID, we can get files by name, files by type, and then there's also same folder options as well. So we want to use the method that's get files, and this will retrieve back all of the files within the drive. And then going into the while, we're going to loop through files while it has next. So while there is a next file, we're going to continue to iterate through all of the files. Let's get the file object information, and that can get returned back files next method. So you need to use the next method to select the available object within the files, and as we're iterating through, then we're assigning the value of that file object into a variable name called file. And then lastly, let's just use the logger log, and we're going to log out the file, and we've got information here that we can select from that file object. So there's options for adding users, editors, and commenters. We can get the content as a blob, and we can get the name of the file. So we'll retrieve back the name of the file and output it into the logger. And of course, we're going to have to accept permissions for the app to access the drive. Let's run the script and see what happens. So we're executing the script right now, and the permissions window should pop up any second. We need to accept permissions because it's a brand new script that we're running and it's accessing content within the drive. So go to review the permissions, select the account that you want to run the script as, and then this app hasn't been verified, so click that advanced link. And within that advanced link, there's more information about unverified apps. So go ahead and click go to the Drive app on safe, and the Drive app is just what we've got the name of the script. And once you select, it'll tell you which account you're going to be accessing the the script as, and also what permissions have been set. If you need more information, you can click the information icon. And if you do want to remove out the permissions that you just set, you can always go to the myaccount.google.com/permissions, and that will list out all of the permissions that you've granted for your account to run scripts. So there's more information. And then once you've satisfied with running the app, provide the permissions for the app to access the drive, and that's going to allow us to run the execution, and it's going to list out all of the files that it finds as it loops through the drive. So I've got quite a lot of files there, and it's just looping through and accessing all of the file objects that I currently have within the drive, and I do have quite a few. So that's just one way that you can use the Drive app, and I'll show you different ways how we can find the starting position and list out the files in a particular folder and more coming up in the next lessons. Hey, welcome back, and in this lesson we want to list out all of the files in a specific folder. So let's go ahead, and I've created a folder that's just DriveApp test, and we can move some of the content files that we have into that folder. So I'm going to select some of the docs that I've got, and these are the ones that we've got within the previous lessons. We'll move it into the DriveApp test folder. So we want to select only the files that are contained within this folder, and the last time when we ran the script we got all of the files. So we need to be more specific which folder we want to get the files from. So we need to be able to set a folder and find a folder on our drive. So let's do that, and we'll do files in folder. So the folder is going to be where the starting point is, and it's going to look for all of the files that are contained within the folder. So we want to select a specific folder from our drive. So let's select the folder, and within the Drive app we want to get folder by ID. So it's going to return back the one specific folder. And when we are looking for plural, then that's going to return back an array of objects. But when we're looking for the ID, there's only going to be the one folder. So every folder is going to have a unique ID. So that's one of the easiest ways to identify the folders. And you can also do it by name, but the name search, you have the option to have more folders with the same name. And the easiest way to get the folder ID is to open it up within the drive, look at the URL within the web URL, and you're going to have the folder ID directly within the web URL. So that's where we can select the ID, and then that way we can use that object and select the folder that we want to get the file contents from. So now that we've got a starting point for where we want to get the files, we can loop through and we can list out, and we'll use the list my files function and update that. And this is just going to require a folder object to be passed in. So we're passing in the folder object that we've got to there within the my files, and then within the parameters here within this function, let's go ahead and we're going to list out the folder. Instead of Drive app, we're going to be searching the get files that are contained within the folder. So let's look for and run the function folder in files in folder and see if we get the files that we just moved in there. So you can see we did search for those specific files. So I believe we've got about 8 files there, and just double check. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we got all of the files that are contained within the folder. So that's how you can set the specific needle to a specific folder and search only that folder. And if you are just searching within the Drive app, then that's just going to return back all of the files that are available within your drive as a total whole. So update your script from the last lesson and search within a specific folder, and also make sure that you do have some files within that folder so that you get some folder results being returned, some file results being returned back. This lesson we're going to be using the Drive app in order to create a file. So let's go ahead and create a function and give the function a name. So I'll just give it a name of makeIt. And then within the function, we want to create a file. So let's create our file and using DriveApp. And then using the method create a file. There's also create a folder as well. So we're creating a file. So it requires a couple parameters. And the first parameter is going to be the file name. So new name, so whatever you want to call the file. And then next is going to be the contents of the file. So we can add in contents of the file. So the name is a string and also the content is a string. So if we want to add in HTML content, I'm going to use a variable for this, and we're going to add some HTML code into a variable called HTML. So let's set that up as well. So using the HTML variable, and then within the variable, we'll have some HTML code that will say hello world, and save it as a file. And let's run the function. And we need to accept permissions because, again, it is interacting with the DriveApp class. So it does require permissions, additional permissions for the app. So it's going to create a file with a name of new name. And by default, that gets created to the root directory. So the file is created, and if we open it up, it's just going to be opened up as a regular text file because we didn't specify a meme type for the file. So it doesn't really have a file type associated with it. So if we want to specify and create it as an HTML file, then we can take this one step further where we specify the meme type. And the meme type, there's a number of different meme types. So you type in meme type, and we're going to set the meme type as HTML. And if you want to add the file to a specific location, so let's run the code and create the new file. And this is just a new HTML file. So just save that, and let's run the makeIt. And this will create a new HTML file. That's the file over there. And also, if we want to specify the folder that we want to place it in, we need to get the folder object. So using the DriveApp, get folder by ID, and then we use the ID value of the folder, and this will set it in a specific location. So if we want to use the same folder location that we did last time, get the folder ID. And within the code, select the folder by its ID. So get folder by ID. And then instead of creating it within the Drive app, you can just create it right within that folder directory. So let's make that and run the code. And now that added in the file in the specified directory. So go ahead, try it out. You can create files, and you can also create folders within a folder. So if, for instance, we want to add a folder in here, so we want to create a folder and then we want to add the file in the new folder, let's do that as well. So a new folder, and using the Drive app, we're going to create a folder, and the folder is going to require parameters. So we'll give it a parameter name of new folder. And then within that new folder, if we want to add the new file that we just created, we can do it this way. So this will create a folder and it will create a file. Run the code. And then we're going to the main folder directory. And actually, I think we created on the root. So there's our new folder that we just created. And there's the file that's in the folder. if you want to place the folder, the new folder, within that folder that we originally selected, we can do that as well, where we update that as folder, and then now it will create the new file into the folder. And the reason that the file is grayed out is that the value is not being used. So we don't have to specify unless we need to make use of the object, so we don't need to specify it and assign the value to it. So this will still create the file into the newly created folder. So let's go back out, go into our test folder, there's the newly created folder, and within that folder there's the file we just created. In this lesson we're going to be getting some drive details. So creating a function that's going to run the script in order to get the details of our drive. Let's set up a variable, and we'll get some of the drive details in a variable. Let's give it a name of drive1. So using the DriveApp, and then when we do the drop down, we've got options here for get files by ID, get files. So we saw that we can return back all of the files. We can also return back all of the folders, get folders by name. And there's one here where we've got the get storage used, get storage limit. So let's output those values. And then also for drive 2, instead of get storage limit, we'll get storage used. And then within the logger log, we're going to output those values. So drive 1 and drive 2, and we'll run the code to get the drive details. So we get a value for the storage limit, and then we get the value for the storage used. And you can also see that here within the left-hand side within the storage details. So we're roughly using about half of the available space. So if we want to calculate it out as a percentage, we can divide the drive 2, because these can just be numbers, by drive 1, and then let's multiply it by 100. So let's see what gets returned back here. So we're using roughly 52% of the available drive, and that also amounts to roughly what we have within the Google calculation. There's also some other values that you might find useful. So within the DriveApp, we can look at the files that are in the trash. So we've got trashed files, trashed folders. You can also just get the regular root folder. So that's the default folder that's selected. You can remove files, you can remove folders, you can search files and search folders. So all of this is available. And we're going to be looking at more of these as we go through the upcoming lessons. So go ahead and try it out. Get the storage limit, get the storage used, and calculate your percentage that you're using up right now. And you can be ready to move on to the next lesson. Let's create a quick application, quick function that's going to send the new files that we've recently created and add them and set them into the trash. So first of all, we're going to create the main function holder, and we'll call it move to trash files and give it a nice meaningful name. And then within the DriveApp, we want to get all of the available files. So we want to search all of the files within the drive and return back all of the files. So get, and using the DriveApp, we get all of the files. And if we want to search files by a specific name or a specific type, we can do that as well. So how about we search files by name? I've got a bunch of files that I've just created that I've got the word new in. So let's try to return some of those where we're going to be searching by name. And this is the name of the files that we want to find. So let's take a look, and we'll create a few other files. I'll make a copy of it, rename, and we'll look for both of these files that have the same name. That's just going to be new HTML file, and we can remove those files. So looking for all of the files that are matching with the name. And then what we want to do is we want to loop through those files. So while the files object has next, we're going to move through to the next file. And when we do find the file, we want to assign to the file object the value of files next. So that when we do the files next, what happens is that this file gets brought out of the files iterator and gets assigned a value of file, and then that also allows us to move to the next one. So it'll automatically keep looping through. Within the logger log, let's select the file, and we'll get the last updated value of those files. So we want to get rid of files that have been recently created. So let's, as we loop through the files object, we get within the file value, we get the next files. Let's set up a variable for getting the current date. So just using, as we do with JavaScript, new date. And then also we want to get the, and we'll get the file date using the file get last updated value. And that way, when we subtract today value from the file date value, that's going to give us how many milliseconds ago the file was created. So let's get the name file using the file object, get the name of the file. We can also get things like the type, and under the file get meme type. So it'll tell us the type of the file. So let's log this information into the logger log. And instead of using variables, let's create an object that's going to hold the file info and set that to a blank object. And then we can assign the values to that object, and we'll log out all of the object contents into file info. And under file info as well, we'll set up a value and give it a value for active. And this is going to be a value when we take today and we subtract whatever the number of value was for the file update. So file info, file date, and actually let's keep this one in just a regular const value. And let's run the code. So we get information about the file. We can see what type of file it is. We've got the name of the file, so it's returning back 5 files, and it also tells us how long these files have been active. So every time we run this, it's going to add additional milliseconds to the time that the file has been active. So if we want to remove out all of the files that have been active under 150,000, under 1 million milliseconds, we can do that. So let's select that as the value, or 1,000,002 milliseconds, and then we can remove those files and set those to trash. So that means that we can have a condition where we get the value of the file active, and if the file active is less than 1,200,000 milliseconds, then we're going to take that file and we're going to move it to trash. So we still have the file object that we can select. And in order to move it to trash, we just set trashed to true. So this is expecting a Boolean value. And now let's run that one more time. So now it's moved those files into trash. Let's run it again. All of the files that were under the 1,200,000 milliseconds have now moved to trash, leaving only the older files. So we got 3 files that were older than that. and it's moved all of the latest files into the trash. So all of the most recently created ones into trash. And if you want to calculate out the value of how many minutes it is, so if you want to only trash files that are less than an hour old, we can work out a formula to get the value for 1 hour. And we'll just have hour 1. And the formula for that is to calculate the number of milliseconds. So if we have 1,000 milliseconds, that we've got 1,000 milliseconds in a second, we've got 60 seconds in a minute, and then we've got 60 minutes in an hour. So this is going to return back the value for the hour. And if we do it this way, this will remove out any files that have been created within the last hour. And let's log out the calculation for the hour. So what happened is we removed out all of the files that were less than an hour old that have this new HTML file name. So that's how you can add files into the trash. And you can also restore files that are sitting within the trash. So let's go ahead and loop through, and we're going to restore some of the files that we had within the trash. So you can put them in the trash, and you can also get them from the trash. So we want to get files from trash, and we want to restore those files. So let's list out the files using the DriveApp. Get trashed files. We want to loop through all of the trashed files. And let's restore the files that are less than 1 hour. So the same format where we can use the while. And as we loop through the files, we'll make the same calculations as we did. And then also calculate out what 1 hour is. So we want to restore all of the files that are less than 1 hour old. And we need to calculate out the file active. So this will allow us to restore the files that are less than 1 hour, so we can make the calculation of the today's date as well as when it was last updated, and restore all of the files that match the criteria of being less than 1 hour and that are sitting within the trash, that have been updated within the last hour and are in the trash. And then we can just update the Boolean value of set trashed. And take set trashed and set that to be false. Suspecting the Boolean parameter. And now let's do get from trash. And that removed out all of the files that we had that were in the trash, and it's restored them. So it's restored the Boolean value of the trashed files and brought them back into their original locations. And it just looped through all of the other files that we had there within that trash folder. So that's how you can select files and move them into the trash. And then also you can get the files from the trash and update the Boolean value to be false, and that's going to automatically move them out of the trash and place them again back to where they originally were within the same folder structure. So let's take some of the files that we just created. We're going to just create a brand new file, or we can duplicate one of the existing ones and just make a copy of this. And I'll give it a name, new test file, and then let's move that test file into the trash. So do a remove on it, and then let's run our script that's going to get it from trash and see if we can restore it that way. So we've moved it into trash, and now our new test file has been moved back into our main folder directory. So the script is working, and it's able to remove out files that were updated in the last hour and pull them back out of the trash. We're going to be looking at the different permissions for files. So all of the Google G Drive files have different permissions. So there's permissions in order to access. So they're the classes that represent users who can access a file or folder besides any individual who's been given explicit access to it. So if you set the file to anyone, there's also anyone with a link, there's domain, domain with a link, and private. So if you are on a domain, then you've got a few other options in addition to the regular Gmail options for file sharing permissions. In order to set the sharing permissions, you can select the file object and set the sharing permissions. If you want everyone to be able to access it, then you would be able to say DriveApp access to anyone. So anyone that has the link, and then you can also select from any of the other access permissions. So we're going to be giving some of the files different access permissions in this lesson. And there's also permissions as well. So there are permissions granted to users who can access file or folder. And these are also opportunities for if you've got collaboration on a document, for editing, viewing, commenting. So this can be seen as kind of like the level of permissions when they have access to the file, what they can do with the file that they have access to. So the permissions are for what you can do, and the access is just overall in general who can get access and who can actually even see the file and what parameters they have to meet in order to be able to access the file. And we're going to be setting some of the permissions, grabbing one of these folders here that we have. We'll just do this new folder. So we need to get the ID of this folder. And we're going to loop through and we're going to get the permissions. So let's set up a function that we can work with and set up some of the variables that we need to use. So getting the ID. And then also we're going to get the folder object. So use the DriveApp. And then get file by ID. And then we're going to specify the ID within the file. Or get folder by ID, and we're going to specify the folder ID in order to make the selection for the folder. And that will allow us to loop through all of the files that are within the folder. So, and what we want to do from the files is that we want to get all of the current editors on the files. And I have added in another email account as an editor. So on the folder, we have an option on the folder itself if we want to get the editors from the folder. And then we can also do this on the file level, and I'll show you how to do that as well. So what this is going to produce, this is going to produce a list. And if we list out the editors into the log, let's run the my permissions. So we've got a Drive user that's an editor. So Drive users, we could loop through each one of the editors. So because there's an opportunity, of course, to have more than one editor on there, so we want to iterate through this full list of editors. So let's take editors and go through for each. And each one of the editors, we're going to pull out and we're going to add into the log. So we can see some of the details of each one of the editors. And I only just have the one editor. So we've got the Drive user within an array, and now we've taken the Drive user out of the array, and we'd see all of them if we had more editors within that array. So if we want to see some information about the editor, we've got opportunity to see the domain, the email, the name, get the photo URL, and also the user login ID. So let's just pull back the email of the user. And we'll also get the name of the user. So this is going to return back the editors. So I do have 2 editors on that file. We can also see viewers on the file. So if we do a get viewers, it's going to return the same idea here and just list this out as viewers. And then as we're looping through, and I'll update this to just say person. And for each folder, additionally, you have an owner level for the folder. Get owner, so that will return back the owner object. And I'll log that. And with owners, there can only be one owner per folder or per file. So it's not going to be returned back in an array format. but we are going to be returning it as a Drive user. And from any Drive user, we can output the information from the Drive user. So let's create a function, Drive user details. And this is just going to get the user information. And from the Drive user, that's what we're going to be using, and we're going to be logging out the details. So for the user, we'll log out the email. I'm just creating a custom function to do this. So for each person that we have, we'll just log them out into the Drive user for each editor we have. And this is going to save us a little bit of coding. I'll just indent these. And then also for the owner, we can output the owner's details as well using the same format. So let's run that. So we've got the owner's details and then the Drive user, the editor's details for the folder. Let's also do this for the files as well. So we'll loop through files and we'll check the permissions, the editors, and then who has access. So let's set some permissions on the file level, and we're going to loop through and see who's got permissions, and we can also set some permissions to access the file contents. So let's get the my files, and we're going to focus on that same folder that we just were looking at. So this is going to be our main root for the folder. And let's loop through and get the files that are contained within that folder. So get the listing of files that are within the folder and getting the files object. So we can iterate through all of the files. So using while files next is true, it's going to continue to iterate through, and let's select the file object. So using files next value is going to return back the file object. And then for the file, we want to get the editors of the file. So let's get a listing of the editors and take the file. And you can get the editors just as we did for the folder. And then we want to loop through each one of the editors and output them. And also we're going to do a log and just get the file name. So we know which file that we're looking at. So get name method in order to see the file. So that's going to be output and logged into the log. And I'm just going to put some asterisks so that it stands out a little bit more. And outputs into the log. So we're getting the name, and then underneath the name, we're going to list out the users, and that's all within the my files function. So we've executed, and we see that this is the file name. This is the user's information, so that's their email address, and then that's also going to be the name. And for the, I believe we've got the two files there, so it's providing us details about the files and who has permission for each one of the files. So for the file as well, you can set permissions for it, set sharing. And within the set sharing, this is where we would set the DriveApp access and the permission values. So taking the DriveApp, and let's set the access. And then the permission that we want to set. So if we want to set it to anyone, we can just open it up to be with anybody. And if we want to add editors, we can add editors this way, or we can add a viewer. So we need an email address for the editor, so that's going to be the one that we can use. So what we'll do is we can set the file sharing, access permissions. We can add and remove the viewers, so the different permission accesses by their email address. So we're adding a viewer, and we want to remove back out that person as an editor. So taking the file, and we can remove editor, because these are all editors, so they all have the editor permissions. And it's going to require the editor get email, so it's going to require the email address for the editor. So for the access parameters, so it does require the 2 arguments. So that also requires the DriveApp permission. And if we're allowing permissions to anyone, let's add them as permissions to view. So anyone can view this file on with the URL. And let's do a quick check to see what we've got as share permissions. So we do have this Lawrence account as an editor, and the permissions are right now they're set for access, so it's restricted access, so only people added can open this link. So let's see if our script makes an update to it. Run the script, select the files, and now let's open up the share permissions. So we've updated this account to be viewer, and we've set the link to be anyone on the internet can view the link. And then if you want to change that, you can always change that as well. So right now we did set it to public, so let's set it as restricted. And when we do set it to public, then we need to also set either the viewer, commenter, or editor permissions as well. So let's set it back to restricted, save, and now when we run the script again, we don't have any editors because we've updated the editors as viewers. So now they're only viewers on the file. So we should not see any results here for any editors. We just see the file names, and we don't have any editors on the files anymore because we've since removed them using the script. So that's how you can set the different permissions. So the access permissions, and I'll just comment this. And there's really the 2 levels of permissions. So access permissions, but then you also need to set what the permission type is. And then you can add viewers, you can add editors directly to the file, and all you need is the email value as a string. So this is the permission for file. So go ahead, try it out, and experiment a little bit with it. Also, just be careful that you are working with files. If you are actively using your drive, that you are selecting a folder that you can experiment in. So you don't want to be resetting any of the permissions on any of the files on your entire drive. So make sure that you do select a folder that you can work out of and practice more about Google Apps Script within that folder. In this lesson, we're going to be creating some PDFs from the doc files that we have currently within the new folder, and we're going to create a brand new folder, just give it a name of PDF, and then drop those files in there. So we're looping through the contents that we've got here, and these are regular HTML files. Also, I'm going to create a doc file here and creating a brand new doc. So we're going to turn this into a PDF. And then we can add in content and just a bunch of stuff here. Save it and just close that file up. So now we've got a variety of files there within the new folder. Let's grab the new folder ID. So this is going to be the folder that we want to loop through. And I'll call this function create a PDF. Set up the ID. So that's our starting point, our main folder that we're going to be working off of. And this is going to be the folder for the source files. So using the DriveApp, we're going to get the folder by ID and then specify the ID for the folder. And let's now loop through and get the files that are contained within the folder. So creating a variable for the files and then using the folder source variable and using get files. So we're going to grab all of the files that are contained. And then using the while files has next value, that we're going to continue to iterate through them and return back the file value. And let's just put some brackets around that. So once we have the file object, then we can convert it into different document types. So we want to convert it into a PDF. So we want to get the document as a blob. So let's select the file object and take the files next. So that will return back the file object. So provide us a usable format. And now let's turn it into a blob file and using the file object. And we're going to get the file and get as. And we can specify the content type that we want to get it as. So there's a bunch of different content types. And the one that we're looking for is we want to return it back as an application PDF type. So we're getting the file and we're getting it as a PDF format. So this is going to return it back as a PDF. Let's take the blob file and set the name of that file. So setting the name, and we'll call it PDF, and then we'll concatenate the old string for the file. So get the name of the file. So use that method. And then also concatenate and add the extension so that it's got an extension of PDF. So that way we can turn it into a PDF type format. Now let's create the file. And we want to create the file in the destination folder. So for the destination folder, let's set up and create a new folder. And I'll call it folder des for destination folder for short. And then use the DriveApp method. And actually we're going to create the folder directly on the root. So we're just okay to use the DriveApp and create folder. And then what do we want to give the folder a name? So we'll give it a name of PDF. It's expecting a string value for the name. So now that we've created a brand new folder, and this is the destination folder where we're going to be dropping the file in. And from the blob that we've just created, we can create a brand new file from that blob. So I'll just give it a name of new file. And then we're going to use the destination folder and create a file in that destination folder, and using the blob file that we just created as the source for the file that we just created. And then we can also log out the new file and get the URL. So that will provide us the URL of the new file. And this is going to be the PDF file that we've just created. And add an extra equal sign there. So let's save it again. So let's run the create PDF and see what happens. So it's looping through and going over to the destination folder. And then afterwards, it's checking to see the contents here. So we've got 3 files that are here. So we've got a couple HTML files and a doc file. And it's getting the blob versions of those files. And what's produced here is the end result for the URL for the final finished file. So let's take a look at this and copy and paste it into the browser. And we see that we do have a PDF file. So this is registered as a PDF file, and that was from one of the files. There's our PDF folder that we created, and there's our 3 PDF files that we created. And this is the one that we were creating from the doc. And then the other 2, I believe they have the same content, and these were coming from the HTML files. So it actually doesn't matter what the source file is. You can loop through, and as long as you've got it within a blob format, there's a number of options that you can output the content as. And let's also loop through the content, and we can get the details of those files, such as the different file types as well. So let's go through and select that PDF folder, and then we're going to get the file information of the newly created PDFs that we just created. So that's coming up next. In this lesson, we're going to be getting details of some content that's contained within one of the folders. So we're going to be working with this PDF folder, and we're going to get information of the files that are contained within that folder. So let's set up a function. We can just call it get details and set up some variables. So the root directory that we want to use. And then also let's get the main folder. So this is where our basic source folder is going to be. So using the DriveApp, and get the file by ID, and then use the ID value in order to make a selection of the file. And actually it should be get folder by ID. So we're getting the folder, and we're getting the whole entire folder by ID. So we want to loop through all of the files that are contained within this folder. So let's get our files object. So give it a variable name of files, and then within the folder, we're going to get the files that are contained within the folders, and just pick up all of the files contained in there. And then let's loop through the files using while. So we've got all of the files while next is true, and while next is true, then we're going to iterate to the next item and select and create the file object. So using files next, and that will return back the next file value. So it gives us the file value to work with. And then within the logger log, let's output some details about the file. So for now, we'll just set it as file, run the script, and get details. And actually, this should be has next instead of next, as next just returns the file. So has next, and if you do encounter that type of error, that just means that you've got the file object, but you didn't get the Boolean return, which is the has next, and that's going to return back a Boolean and determines whether calling next will return an item. And if it does return an item, then that's going to be true. If there's no item, then it's going to be false. So that's where we threw that error. So that gives us the 3 files that we have within the folder. So we want to get some more details about the files. And I'll create an object, call it file info. And then within the file info object, this is where we can output some of the file details that we want to use. So for the file itself, and there's quite a lot of details that you can get within the file info. So file info, we can get the URL. So you can always pick up the URL. So using the file object get URL method, that will return back the URL. And within that object, so that we can see the contents that are contained in there. We can also get just different details. So file and, or actually it should be file info for the object, and then size, and then get the file. And then within the get, we've got an option for getting size. So it's going to return back the size of the file. So run it one more time. And so that gives us the size of the file. And within the file, if it has a thumbnail, we can get the thumbnail. We can get the target ID. We can get the parents. We can also get the download URL. So that's going to be the URL that can be used to download the file so directly within the browser. So that's a URL that you can share, that you can provide for downloading. So download, export. So it just changes the parameters there, and if we're just looking at it, then it's still using the same ID. So that's going to be the ID there for the file. So if we want to get the file info and get the ID value. So all of the files will have a specific ID, and this is an ID that you can reference and you can access the file. So let's create a spreadsheet, and we're going to track the file information into the spreadsheet. So we can do that as well from the Drive, or we could kick it off and initiate it from the spreadsheet. So let's create a spreadsheet, and spreadsheet object using the spreadsheet app class. So using create and the name of the sheet that we want to create. So we can give it a name of whatever the PDF folder is. And this is also something that we can use dynamically. So we can do a folder get name, and then this can also be used for the spreadsheet that we're creating. So it's creating the name of the spreadsheet, so it creates a new spreadsheet with the given name. And also now we want to create a sheet within the spreadsheet object. So let's go ahead and add in a sheet. So inserting a brand new sheet, and we need a name for the sheet. And this is the sheet where we're going to be storing the file info. We can just call it file info. And also let's get the spreadsheet and get the details of the spreadsheet. So SSID, and this is the spreadsheet object, and get ID will return back the ID of the spreadsheet. And this way we can also identify it within the Google Drive as well. So we can use that ID value of the sheet, which is going to correspond to the file ID. And that's how we can reference it. If we need to move it, we can do that as well. So as we go through and as we iterate through, let's go ahead and build an array. So instead of building an object, we're going to build an array of the values. So create an array, and to the file info, just do a push of the content, because we know for the spreadsheet we need to have an array format. So we're going to just push all of these values in. And for the first row, we can do an append row, and the row, the content that we can append within the row. So this is going to be within an array format. And we can use these as the headings. So we can say URL and then size, download, ID, and so on. So you can get all of the information that you want. We're just appending the row. And instead of logging into the log, we do an SS append row, and we're going to append it with the file info. So let's see what happens. So now we are going to be looping through this folder, getting the folder as ID. So that's going to be our starting point. We're going to create a spreadsheet, and within the spreadsheet, we're going to create a sheet that's going to be called file info. And then within that file info sheet, we're going to be setting up the headings for the spreadsheet. And then as we loop through the files, we're going to log the file information into the newly created spreadsheet. So let's do it and hit run. And we're going to have to accept some more permissions because this app now is going to require quite a few permissions. And just let it run through all the way. And now if we go in our root directory, we've got the newly created spreadsheet. It's given the name of PDF. And if I go into the file info sheet, I've got all of the information there. So I've got the URL, I've got the size, I've got the download links, and the ID. So all tracked into the spreadsheet. So this is how you can use spreadsheets to track some data and some information. And there's also, if you want to move your spreadsheet, if you want to place your file in a particular location, I'll show you how to do that in the upcoming lesson. So go ahead, give it a try. Make the combination of the Drive as well as tracking into the spreadsheet, and you're going to be ready to move on to the next lesson. Hey, in this lesson, we're going to move the files from one folder to another. So we do have some files within the PDF folder. So selecting that, and then we're going to loop through and we're going to get each one of these files, and then we're going to drop those files into a newly created folder. So we'll just call it move files. And let's set up the ID object. So this is going to be our main source ID. So set up the variable. So call it the source folder. And this is where all the files are located that we want to move. So DriveApp, get folder by ID, so that we can specify which folder that we're looking into. And again, you always have to be really careful because you don't want to just set and have these scripts run on your entire Google Drive, especially if you've got some files in there that you might not want to move and move around. So these types of scripts, if you don't specify the starting, the source folder, it can run through your whole drive and move files around. So unless, of course, you want that to happen. So now that we've got the source folder, we want to get the files that are contained within the source folder. So these are all of the source files that we want to move. So let's use the source folder and get the files object that we can iterate through. And with using the while loop and while files has next. So while there's a next file, we're going to loop through, and then let's set up the file object. And using the files next method, so it's going to return back the file, the specific file that we're looking at. And so we want to move it to a new folder. So let's create the folder that we want to move it into, and we can move it by ID as well. So selecting the file, and let's create a new folder. So this is where we're going to be placing it. So DriveApp, create folder, and I'll just give it a name of moved. So that's the folder that we're going to move it into, and this is fine to sit on the root directory. So we're going to move the contents of the file into this end folder. So that's the one that we're going to be using. So looping through the source folder, getting all of the files, and then adding those files to the end folder. So grab the end folder, and actually just the end folder is all that we need. So the end folder, and then we just need to use the add file method to add the file object to the new folder. So let's run the script, the move files, and I'll show you what happens. So we're moving the files, we're looping through the PDF, and we're taking those files and we're dropping them into the moved folder. So we're able to pick them up and move them. And let's go back into the PDF. I'm going to create a brand new file and just add in some text there, and we'll run the script again. So that this way we've got a file that's sitting within the PDF folder. We run the script, and let's go over to moved. So that's the new move that we've created. Actually, there should be two of them now. So the file is sitting within there, and also if I go into PDF, the file is moved from there. So what if we want to create a file and move the file? Move, create file. And just as we saw in the last lesson, we can select where the creation of the file. So we're using the spreadsheet object, and let's go ahead and we're going to create the file. So spreadsheet app, and then create. So that's going to create a file. I'll just give it a name of new file. So this is going to be a blank file that we're creating. And this is going to return back the spreadsheet ID. So we can get the spreadsheet and get the ID, because we're going to need the ID in order to identify the file. And let's select the file. So using the DriveApp, get file by ID, and get the file using its ID. And let's look into the log just to make sure that we get the file object. So run the create file, and then afterwards I'll show you how we can move it. So we've got the new file, we've got the new file object. So we can take that file and we can add the file to a new folder. So if I have the end folder there, and you can also do this within one statement as well. So if you're not using that end folder multiple times, you just do create folder moved. Actually, this is creating a folder. So I need to get the folder by ID. And actually, we're going to get the folder by name. Get folder. And get folders by name is going to return back multiple folders. So if we do that, then we're going to have the possibility of multiple folders. So let's get the folders by name. And get folders by name. And we only want to return back the first result. There are a few ways that we can do this, and we need to have a condition in order to run this. And then we can set the value of folder. So let's set the value of folder to blank. So this is globally going to be used. We'll have our condition. Folders by name moved. And we'll check to see if it has next. And actually, let's put this into an object as well. So it's a little bit easier to read. You don't have to, but otherwise then we have to keep typing all of the DriveApp get folders by name. So make sure that there is a folder by that name. And if we do find a folder that is by that name, that means that we can put the content into the folder. So let's remove out the excess content and set the folder to equal to folders next. So that's going to return back the folder object. And I'm going to move some of this up, some of the logic up as well, where we're getting the file, and actually this should be get file by ID. So let's get the file by its ID, so it's the newly created one. Get it by ID. And if the folder exists, then within the folder we can, and I'm just going to declare the folder object. And within the folder we're going to add a file, and the file that we're going to be adding is the file that we've just picked up and that we've just created. So we need to add it as a file object. So this was a little bit more complicated, where we are selecting and creating the new file, defining a folder that we can use globally, and then we're checking to see. And actually, we don't need the folder to use globally. We can just declare the value of folder there. So we're checking to see and getting the ID, so the ID of the file that we just created, and then we're getting the file as an object within the DriveApp, so that will allow us to take the file and move it. We check to make sure that there is a moved folder, and if there isn't, then we just skip on and we just continue on to log out the file. If there is a moved folder, then we select the first instance of the moved folder and assign a variable name of folder to it, and then that's where we add the file into there at that point. So let's see what happens. So we're going to be creating a new file and dropping it into the moved folder. And let's go to the move folder. So it'll just add it into wherever the first moved folder is that it found. So there's the file that it just created. Let's delete it and keep the folder open. We'll run it one more time. And that way we're going to be depositing the file directly within the folder. So go ahead and try that out. Add the file directly into the folder, as well as try moving the files from one folder into another folder. So this lesson, we're going to be searching the drive and returning back the file information from the Google Drive. So let's go ahead and create the function. And this is just going to be a function that's going to search the drive. And we'll also make it more dynamic. We'll search particular value. And then this function will start the search process. And here is where we can set up a value that we're going to be searching for. So we can call this search term, and I'll call it for new. And then it's going to run the searcher function, which is going to return back all of the files that meet the search values, the search terms. And then within here, we'll set up an object or variable name of found. So returning back from searcher. And right now we'll just return val back. And we can log out the results of found. So right now it's not going to do a whole lot. We can do the start search, and obviously it's not going to search the drive, but it will run through and it will return back whatever value we're passing into it. So we want to search the drive for a particular value within the drive. So looking through all of the folders, we've got certain parameters and whatever parent folder we want to set up. So let's do the ID again. And if we want to search in a particular folder, we can search in a particular folder, or we can just search in the drive in general. So that's something that we can add if needed later on. So let's set up a folder that we can search within. And we're just going to copy that ID and have the ID. And then within the main folder, we can use the DriveApp and we can just get the folder by ID and then use the ID. So this is going to be where we're going to be starting our search. And there's also, if we just want to search the drive in general, we can do that as well, just by searching within the DriveApp class. So we don't have to search in a particular folder, or we can add that option in to search within the folder. So let's return back the files that contain that particular term. So set up the files and then using the DriveApp and search. So we can search for files and we can search for folders. So these are the parameters that we're searching for. So it requires a variable that we can search. So if we want to search by title, we can do title contains, and that's the parameter. And then what we want the title to contain. So the title is going to contain whatever value we've passed in. And this actually needs to have the quotes around it. So just wrap the double quotes around the value. So this is what we're going to be searching for. And actually I'm going to rename this to result. So that's going to return back the result. So if result has next, then we can loop through and we can get the result values. And if we only want to just search on the one, we also have an option to loop through and do a while result has next. And if it does have a next value, then we can get the file value, and doing result next is going to return back the file. And let's create an object. And I'll just call that results. So it'll just be a blank object. And then we can add to that blank object all of the results that we get. And I'm actually going to update this and change it into an array. And then within the array, we're going to create an object for the results. And then we can populate results with the ID. So this is the ID that we're finding. And get the file get ID. So return back the ID of the file. And then within the results object, we can get the URL as well. So all of that same information that we had before, where we get the name, we can also get the size, So if we want the size of the file, get the size. Also, if we want the owner, results, owner, file, get owner. So you've got access to all of this information that you can get within the object. And then once we've created the results object, and I'm just going to rename this and returning back, instead of results, I'll call it res. And then this is the object that we're going to return back. So take res and we'll push whatever the results object is into that array. So it's going to return back an array of all of the matching values. And this is just going to be searching right on the root directory for any of the files that are matching. So we can see we're going to start getting back the results and then logging that result information. So there's quite a bit of stuff there, and it's going to produce a really massive array of all of the results. So there's quite a lot of stuff there that was returned. And we can fine tune it to search within the folder. So let's update that value, and now it's going to search within a particular folder. So let's use the folder value and search the titles within the folder. And it should only have just the one result now that gets returned back. So there we've got the one result. So we've got the URL, the user, the size, and also let's also within the results. And this is one of the reasons I like to use the objects, because it's really easy to update if you need more information. And let's select and get the type. Get the meme type. So we can tell what type of file it is there. And run it one more time. And we've got the meme type, that this is a Google Apps spreadsheet, size of it, so we don't have any content in there. If we add in some content, it'll update the size of the file. And let's run it one more time. And the size is still small. So it is a spreadsheet, so it doesn't hold a whole lot of size on the drive. So that's how you can search for a file and return the file back. So I do have a challenge for you, and the challenge is going to be to open up a spreadsheet and create a UI object with a prompt that's going to search the drive and then return back the results within the spreadsheet for the searched value. And a lot of it's going to be based off of what we just did in this lesson and some of the previous lessons. So that's coming up next, where we're going to create that project. So the challenge for this lesson is to create a sheet and then add a bound script. And within the bound script, we've got a prompt that's going to pop up. And here's what we're going to be searching for. So we're looking for any file that has where the title contains this. We've got 3 files that we've created on the drive. Let's try it out and see what happens. So once it finds the file, it's going to record the file information, whatever information we want, into the spreadsheet directly. And we can continue to search for different titles as well. So going into our drive, if we want to find the file where we've got an example, and searching for the term example within the title. So that returns back some more results. So this way we can have a spreadsheet that's going to be tracking the contents of our Google Drive and outputting them directly within the spreadsheet. A bound script within a spreadsheet that's going to have a prompt pop up, and it's going to allow us to search some of their files on the drive and return the results back into the spreadsheet. So let's go over to the drive and create a brand new spreadsheet and create blank spreadsheet. And I'm just going to give this a name of Drive Searcher. And we're going to have to add to the UI a button that's going to search. And then we can just return the results back in the main sheet, so into the sheet 1. So we can rename this to results if we want. So let's use the tools, open up the script editor. Give the project a name. And I'll just call it Drive Search V2. So we want it to add the prompt from the user and allow the prompt. So let's set up a function, and that's within the UI menu. So on open, we're going to run the script, and the script is going to grab the UI object from the spreadsheet app. So get the UI object, and that way we can use the UI and create a menu item. And we need to add in a caption for the menu. So just call it advanced, and then add item, and the item that we want is search. And this actually needs to have quotes around it, and that's a string. And I'll just create a function called find drive. And then let's add to the UI. So add the function to the UI. So whenever anyone opens up the spreadsheet, they're going to have the UI option. I'm going to just run the on open, so that will add the button into the spreadsheet. So just to the right of the help. So there's our button. And now what we want for the button, we want to have a pop-up prompt and find and search the drive. So within the find drive function, let's select the UI object again, the spreadsheet app, and get the UI object. And for the response, we're going to use the UI prompt, and within the prompt, search, and that could be the title, search for what. And we also need to add the button options. So add in the button set. So the UI, and select the button set and whatever button set that you want. I'm going to just have OK and cancel. And then the condition will be if the response selected button value is equal to the UI button of OK. And if it is, then we know that we did get a result. So let's set up the result. And this is whatever the search term is that we want to use. And coming from the result, we'll just get the response text object. And for now, we'll just log in the search term into the log. So let's try it out, hit the search, and we'll type in test into there. And of course, we don't see the log because that's we don't see the execution log. So let's run the find drive and get the execution log. So this way we can see the log information, and there's the value of test being sent in. So now what we want to do is something similar to what we just did in the last lesson, where we want to search for a term and search the drive. So let's add in and create the function. And whatever value we want to search for. And so we want to return back the results and add it into the spreadsheet. So let's create another function, and this will add the data to the sheet. So it'll add the row of contents to the sheet. So, and as we search the drive, we are going to return back multiple results from the search term. So we can set up an object, and we can call this results or whatever, found results or whatever we want. And we'll search the drive for the search term and then get back the results. And if results, so if there are results that are returned back, then we can iterate through the results. So the results, and use the for each for the result, and that will just be the file that's going to get returned back. And then within the log, we'll log out the file object. And this is just to test to make sure things are working properly, and then afterwards we're going to handle the adding to the sheet. So let's create the function to search the drive function, and this is going to be similar to what we did the last time, where we're going to be searching the entire drive for the folders. So let's set up the results, and using the DriveApp, we're going to search for files, or we could also search for folder names as well if we're looking for folders. So title contains, and whatever term the title contains, so that's under VAL. And then we check to see if there's results, and whatever we want to return back, that's going to just sit within this array. And then let's loop through while results has next. So if there's a next file, then we're going to return back the result information. And let's get the file object within the results next method. So it's going to return back the file information. And let's create a temporary object. And actually, it's probably better to set this up within an array. So let's do that instead, where we'll just have an array of values, and that's going to make it a lot easier to add to the sheet. So we can get the file information, so we can get the name. So usually the name is probably a good one to start with. So get the name, and we just need to comma separate out these. So we can get the owner value, we can get the file, and there should just be a comma there. So it should be file get URL, and so on. So you get whatever information you want. So looping through, and then once it's got that information, it's gonna take root and push the temporary file information into that main array that we're returning, and then return back the value of ret. So save, and now let's run that one more time. And we need to accept permissions because we've added additional functionality to the app. So let's go through and accept the permissions for the app so that we can run it. We should have the prompt showing up there and selecting new. And then so new's the value that we've selected. So now it's looping through and returning back all of the files where the title contains the word new. So all of those files are ones that contain the word new. And we can also track those files directly into our spreadsheet. So now we've got it within an array format. So it's really easy to add to the sheet. And maybe this can be called the data. And this is just row of contents that we're adding. So let's wrap this up and create the add to sheet. So within the const, we'll get the spreadsheet, and using spreadsheet app, get the active sheet. So we'll get active and then get the active sheet. Or we could also select the sheet by name. So get sheet by name, and then whatever name or whatever sheet we want to place it within. So we want to place it within results. So that's adding it to the sheet object. And we can append a row. And the row that we're appending is just going to be called data. And I'll just update some of these file names with a more unique name. And we'll just have find this within the name. And just do some more renaming here. And then we'll look for the word find this and return back these 3 files. So now we can run the function, and we want to search for find this. So let's search and let the script run. And let's try it one more time in the debugger. So it looks like something went wrong there. So have the pop-up find this, and let's see, it is finding files, but it's not tracking those files. And that's because we're not running the function add to sheet, so I just missed that. So instead of logging it, let's log it and add to sheet. So that was just a missed function. So hopefully this time we'll try it out and we should have the fully functional app. So find this, and it should find the file information and add it to the sheet. So go ahead and try it out, build your own version of this project. Throughout the earlier lessons on the Drive app, we've seen that there's a number of things that we can do with the Drive app, and this is predominantly working with the files. So we've got files and folders within the Drive. There's all kinds of different types of files. So we can select files, we can rename files, we can move files around, we can get files, we can search for files, and there's quite a bit of power with this when we're tracking it into spreadsheets. So just as the project that we saw, where we can search the Drive and return back some of the results and permanently have it within the record of it within the spreadsheet. So that's a nice, easy way to track and get your Drive information all within a spreadsheet, and then you can review that information within the columns of the spreadsheet. And that was done with the Bound app, and a lot of times as well when you are using the Drive app. And if you want to find out more about the Drive app query terms, there's a list here at the developers.com.google.com for Drive. And this is the one that we're using where the title contains, so we identify the object, and then we've got the operators, the different file query terms here, so we can use title from within the full text, we can look for different meme types, modified dates. All of this can be searched for using the Google Apps script, and we can search the Drive for all of this information. So this gives us a really nice, neat way that we can fine-tune our search results, listing out the files that are available on our Drive, and we can also search by the owners, the parents, starred, trashed, so we can use these terms and have different operators in order to return the results that we're looking for. So Drive app, when used in conjunction with something like the spreadsheets, this provides an excellent way that you can track and log out information from your Drive and create reports of the contents of your Drive using a combination of the spreadsheet app class and the Drive app. There's more information, of course, available at the Google website, the Google Apps Script website about Drive app, as well as more examples of how to use Drive app. And in addition, within the editor, once you've selected the file object, you can try out some of the other different methods that are within the pop-up. You can select the methods, and from those set methods, they do always have examples here, and if there are any errors, then you're going to get the underline. It's going to tell you what arguments are required, as well as give you an example of how to fix and how to update the method and the requirements of each one of the methods. If you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for taking the section on Drive app.